Welcome back to A Celtic State of Mind. I'm Paul John Dykes, and today, the Thursday Bulletin, as always, I'm joined by JP Mason and Declan McConville. Welcome back, guys. Loads to talk about. And unfortunately, some of the things that we're talking about is taking the focus away from a new era for Celtic, a new management team, a new manager, some new recruits that one of whom we saw performing yesterday, the first game in a while yesterday, but we're going to have to speak once again about Lee Griffiths. Before we do that, JP, interesting choice of jersey across your right shoulder. What's your thoughts on this Sunday, first and foremost?
Buongiorno, Paul. Come stai? That's about the extent of my Italian. But in actual fact, I was thinking about this before we came here. I get taught Italian at school by a Geordie, and so we get taught Italian in a Geordie accent. So it was like,
brilliant.
Dove il supermercato? You know, like that's my best Geordie. But Miss Beatty was my Italian teacher, but she was also a Geordie. So there was always a Geordie twang to any Italian words that we learned, and I just thought of that right there. So this Sunday, I mean, Italy, Scotland is with you 100%. I mean, this can't happen. If it was bad enough last night, then a final and a victory is just, it's beyond.
I'm relaxed about this. Declan, do you share my enthusiasm? Do you share my optimism for Sunday? I'm pretty relaxed about Sunday's final.
Yeah, Italy have shown their quality against Belgium and Spain, and obviously, on the other hand, England put out Germany. But I think in terms of the quality throughout those teams, Italy have shown their worth in this tournament, and are just a quality side from the very position of the goalkeeper right up to Ciro Immobile. So I'm not too worried. Again, last night, extra time against a side that they were all over for 90 minutes and then get a jammy penalty. I still don't think it's a penalty. Don't get the point in VAR when you can't correct your error, and that's ultimately what gets them through. So I'm not too worried at all. And I think guys like Chiellini and Bonucci will stick the boot into big chains. So I think we'll be all right.
I think so. We're not going to labour the international scene. There is plenty to talk about in relation to the rip-roaring, the free-scoring, the never-boring Glasgow Celtic. Again, let's have a wee look at that number over your shoulder. It was 10 times that when we started, JP. Only 12 days to go to Midtjylland. And there's going to be a massive question mark over whether Lee Griffiths will be involved in that game. Before we get on to Lee Griffiths, James Forrest. So he's isolating again. He's been in close contact with someone with COVID. And Ange Postecoglou, when asked about it post-match yesterday, wasn't able to confirm or otherwise at this moment in time if he would be part of the team. But he wasn't concerned about his fitness due to the fact that obviously he's been at the Euros as well. Yet another blow. I mean, we're trying to start this new era, JP, and already it almost seems stop-start.
Yeah, it's a horrible continuation, really, of all the things that blighted us last season, which, a lot of it was COVID related. Let's not step away from that. I've been battered in comments that I've made about COVID and how it's affected us, and I've never tried to fly that, it's affected us more than other clubs, because obviously it's affected every club across the board. But we really do seem to have, Forrest being the latest casualty, albeit he's fine. But I mean, I've just had to self-isolate myself for 4 days for exactly the same reason. I'm okay, I knew I didn't have it, but it's so frustrating to have to basically, jail yourself for 4 days and not be able to do anything. So it must be even more frustrating when you're a footballer and you're wanting to contribute to the restart, I guess, what you want to call it, of Celtic under Postecoglou. And I just, I hope that it doesn't affect his the start of the season. Obviously people need that kind of like those few games under their belt before a big game. And he is a big game player. He might divide opinion a little bit in the Celtic support, certainly from some of the guys that sit around about me at Celtic Park, who have given him dog's abuse over the years, even when he's scoring, match-winning goals and things like that in Champions League qualifiers. But yeah, he needs games under his belt, and then all of a sudden, bang, 12 days, and we've got our first competitive game, and he won't have had the same. He won't be as up to speed as the rest of them.
It is a frustration. Declan McConville also begs the question: if he doesn't play, then who does? I think that, we are well aware of the players within the squad, the wider squad, who can play in that position. Karamoko Dembele, for example, could fit in there. And Marian Sved, but where is Marian Sved? I don't think he's in Wales, is he?
No, not a clue where Marian Sved is. Even Karamoko Dembele, I think he was caught in training pictures, but yesterday, nowhere near either one of the teams. So, begs another question, but again, I think yesterday it was Owen Moffat that played off that right-hand channel, and cracking goal, absolutely terrific finish. Thought he played well. I'm sure Ange Postecoglou was impressed by him. So you never know. We'll just see what happens in the rest of these pre-season games that we've got. Know that I'm saying fire him right in, the 19-year-old, but he never did anything to harm his chances of being the pick that Ange's got if James Forrest isn't available for Midtjylland. Because
Declan's brought him up and he is on the list of topics to discuss, let's have a wee chat about the young kid. Because I agree with you, Declan, I thought he was outstanding. There was a few youngsters that caught my eye, and we'll talk about that once we get to the Wednesday game. But seeing how he's been brought up, Ange Postecoglou, JP has spoken about having faith in the youth and how important that's going to be to rebuild Celtic. He's went out there, he's played an absolute blinder, let's be honest, with the corkscrew curls, the ginger hair. He's a Denny lad. Which I've got to admit, going into the game yesterday when I seen the team lines, probably like a lot of Celtic fans, I was scrambling about having a look at the academy pages to try and find out a wee bit more about some of the players, JP, that I'm not familiar with. Some of them will be playing for the Colts next year, I'm sure. But here's a guy who's done himself absolutely no harm in any way, shape or form. Next thing you know, James Forrest is isolating. We're coming up to a big game. We've not really seen much of Dembele. We don't know where Sved is. And you just never know. The worlds could align and this guy is thrown in. But I take Declan's concern, I really do, because I don't like players coming in and all of a sudden he's the next X, Y and Z. And, I was always also very impressed with his post-match comments. He came across really, really well, JP, very humble. So what was your thoughts about his performance, and what a goal he scored?
That was a great goal, yeah. I just I watched the majority of it this morning on the playback feature, thanks to the Pass to Paradise. I thought he looked really lively. Kind of looks like a character from Gregory's Girl or something like that. He's got that kind of like, it doesn't look of this time. You can
Mick
imagine.
Hucknall was the comparison yesterday, JP, on Twitter.
What?
Mick Hucknall.
Oh no, Mick Hucknall.
I say he was getting
a little bit harsh. I was thinking more of just like one of the wee guys that cutting about in Gregory's Girl with like the total retro, the Umbro Scotland trackie with the Umbro badges all down the side. Like I could just imagine him in that in the 70s with a big, huge lapel collar as well. I mean, maybe my imagination's going running.
No, not of his time. It's an interesting thing that you say there, because remember, Neil Lennon used to say that about Paddy McCourt. He was like a 1970s throwback.
Aye.
And quite often on Twitter, I've been called an early 2000s throwback. So I get what you're saying there, JP, but a hugely impressive debut.
I know. He took his goal really well. He looked excited, looked hungry for the ball, and just looked lively, and he got plenty of plaudits from the commentators. Joe Ledley being one of them. And that was quite cool to see him back in amongst it. I always liked Joe Ledley as a player for Celtic. It was good that, could this, like you said, could the stars align? Could it be a moment whereby he gets an opportunity, a la Kieran Tierney getting an opportunity, way back when? And because if he gets a jersey and he plays well, then you wouldn't really want to take it off him, would you? So I mean, and right at the start of the season as well, if he gets faith put in him in that game in Midtjylland, or against Midtjylland, should I say, then if you perform on that level, then you really are kind of doing a kind of Frimpong style, weighing your marker down. Well, I can do it for you, so he'll keep getting played, but we'll wait and see.
Absolutely, and we're in that situation at the moment where we're getting to see some of the young guys that ordinarily we wouldn't have seen. And I'm really looking forward to that. I'm always massive on young talent coming through at Celtic and the best traditions of the club. The fact he's from Denny, which is nearly mocking land, also helps. So big shout out to the Denny CSC if you're watching. Now, we need to speak about Griffiths. We need to talk about Griffiths once again. Now, he missed last season's pre-season camp in France due to being unfit. Now, the decision to hand him a new contract, again, we spoke about it at length on a Celtic State of Mind. It divided the ACSOM team, it divided the Celtic support. Certainly not down the middle, by the way. It wasn't a 50-50 divide. I mean, far more people were saying he should be hunted and should have been hunted a long time ago. But the decision to hand him, it was met with a great deal of disapproval, I think it's fair to say. And now he's been sent home from our training camp in Wales. And this is due to, and I'm going to be careful about how we word this section of the show, allegations of improper online behaviour with an underage girl. With the focus on allegations at this stage. So please respect the fact there's so much we can and can't say about this at this moment in time. The club will now look into this matter carefully, was the quote coming out from a club spokesperson. Police Scotland said that they are making inquiries and assessing for criminality. So they're having a look to see if anything that's happened is criminal. Now, I think everybody by this stage knows what we're referring to. And, it would be easy for me to say, if found guilty, we should do this. If not, we should do that. I have a real fixed view on this, and anyone who is involved in improper conduct of this nature, that kind of behaviour cannot be condoned. You don't want that kind of behaviour at our football club. Simple as that. And I'm not specifically talking about Lee Griffiths, because at this stage I don't know what the evidential value of anything is. But that's as much as we can really say on the matter. If that has been proven to be real, then the club will act, I'm sure, and we will comment on that. It is what would you call a developing story. But over the last couple of weeks, leading up to this story, in actual fact, Declan and JP, and we were talking about this before we came on live. I've been told by a number of females that getting messages from footballers has become the norm. Messages of this type. Now, we know that the allegation is that this is an underage girl, and that adds a far more serious undercurrent to the allegation. But in terms of footballers sending messages willy-nilly, and that, pardon the pun, to girls, and it's become the norm. And some of them are saying that they are bombarded with messages. Basically, what's being used is Instagram and Snapchat. Now, at that point, Declan, we're talking about people who are in relationships, people who are married, but a lot of these people who are perhaps representing football clubs that you buy into emotionally, financially. And we're now at in a situation where there seems to be a toxic culture of this. And there will be quite a lot of footballers that are looking at that ticker tape this morning on Sky Sports, safe in the knowledge that they may have done similar, and I don't mean underage girls, but I mean sharing images, asking for pictures from females, etc. Declan, it's a very difficult one for clubs to deal with, but surely steps have to be taken to combat this.
Yeah, they do. Again, I don't think it's just a football problem. There's been stuff in politics in the past few years that we've seen come out of this, and people lose their jobs over it. So it's not just in football, but again, it's people in in position of power using that to, get their own way as such, and it's not right. So, the right steps have to be taken in this, and the investigation will happen. But in terms of the wider context of football clubs, especially, and organisations, it brings them into disrepute, and that's the question. Them as an organisation. So the right steps have to be taken in this. And again, it's just another long list and a list of issues that, Lee Griffiths has had. So we'll see what happens on this. But yeah, it's not right. And in terms of the context of it, not the actual situation, because that will obviously full investigation will take place into that. But yeah, it's something that probably does have to be looked at in terms of why this continues to happen, not just in the football world, political world, and other parts of society where people in positions of power feel as if they can do this and get away with it.
This is the thing. That's the aggravator, Declan. You've hit the nail on the head. People in position or profiles of power, right? So when you're looking, JP, at a situation, it's not about me being out of touch with society. I know that males and females indulge and engage in this way, and if it's two adults and they're quite happy with it, fine. Back in my day, I had a mobile phone that was like a brick. It worked like a pager. It cost you 12 pence a text. So it was a wee bit different back then, JP.
Motorola,
so,
was it a Motorola one by any chance?
It was. I think I still might have it. I might have kept a hold of that. Yes. But that's what I'm not saying that people shouldn't communicate in this way. If that's what they choose to do, absolutely fine. But what I am saying is that we're in a situation where you even just have to look at last season. So we've got a situation with Jeremy Frimpong. We know what happened with the female coming over from America, etc., etc. But there was also something shared online about a video, where he was actually speaking to someone's daughter online, live, and then the Ocoflex moment as well. And when we were getting news coming through last year about Lee Griffiths, and there was all this images in the gym and all that carry on, and I suggested, JP, and I know you just suggested before we came live here, get him off the thing. I mean, let's concentrate on the football here. No matter what happens and how this develops, it's going to end badly. Now, I understand how footballers try to create a brand. I get that. Right, so social media is a big part of that. They use it. It's also a way, JP, of engaging with fans in a way that they couldn't engage before. Because, footballers now, in terms of the relationship and the engagement opportunities that they have with fans, is completely different from what it was, even 20, 30 years ago. You can't go up to Barrowfield or wait outside the ground as much as you did on a daily basis. So coming back from training, engaging with them, they're so protected. So I get why they use social media. But, I mean, this is the kind of thing that's happening time and time again, JP. I mean, I look at the club and I think they're almost powerless. They're going to have to deal with this. Of course they are. And they will deal with it properly. But they're almost powerless to this kind of behaviour that you would expect better from players representing your club, surely.
Yeah, I think it's when a player has a profile and, it's like you said, back in... God, I can't believe when I say this, but back in our day, back in the 90s or whatever, you couldn't just get access to a football player, through the internet. Do you know what I mean? If you wanted to actually ever have any conversation with a football player, you need to go to Archaeos or something like that in the town, and hope you might bump into them in the VIP room. But like now, girls can get access to, or girls or guys can get access to a football player through direct message on Twitter or Instagram or whatever. And that opens up a channel that then is reversible. So the player, if he is wanting to do, can then get in touch with a girl, in which case this is allegedly what's happened here. And I just despair that it's something yet again that it could have been any player. And shock horror, it's potentially Lee Griffiths, and you just despair that just as you see maybe getting a redemption, a shot at redemption, and then this goes and happens. You think, well, it's not even football related. It's not even as if he's not fit or carrying a bit of weight or anything like that. It's something completely out with football. It just is that leaves a bad taste in the mouth. And the thing is as well, it's not so, I don't know, it's not so punishable. It's not as if he's going to get 10 years in Barlinnie for this, right? That's not what it is, but it's a really grey area whereby it's kind of like, well, this isn't cool if this is what's happened. And therefore, everyone's just kind of left going, this is probably a lot of people, are thinking time's up for him.
Oh, yeah.
And that's a sad state of affairs if that is the case.
Well, the thing is, JP, and as I say, and I've said, and I'll say this again, at this moment in time, you're dealing with a minute piece of information. Therefore, we're not even, and you'll notice if you went back on what we've said, we're not even naming the player. We're naming an allegation. We're not saying that he's guilty of that allegation. However, when the club deal with it, they will deal with it obviously from the civil perspective, and the police will deal with the criminal aspect of it. One way or another, this will develop, and we will be speaking about it again, and we will be speaking about that player again for all the wrong reasons. It's the worst possible time. Now, Declan, when I was looking at the interviews, the post-match interviews yesterday, I seen a lot of feedback coming through on Ange Postecoglou's demeanour, the content of some of his answers, and I was thinking it could well be the usual. You know, we're hanging on every word at this moment in time, Declan, aren't we? We're maybe looking too deeply into how he appears to be, but there was a bit of concern about Ange Postecoglou. Do you think it's all relating to the fact that he's dealing with a lot of other stuff off the park, where all he wants to concentrate on is the football?
Yeah, it will be. You know, this has been a stressful time for him in terms of trying to actually get into the country to get started, to then, you know, kick off at Lennoxtown and take the team down to Wales, as well as that he's trying to deal with COVID protocols and everything else around that. Players wanting to leave probably is another issue he's got, ongoing conversations. Whereas, you know, yesterday was just pre-season friendly at Sheffield Wednesday, and I think all he's probably wanting to focus on is the players in the park. So I don't think there's anything really to read into it. It was his first game. I thought, you know, when he changed the team, he definitely said something about around 30 minutes, and obviously we came back out. So the shape looked good. I thought the high tempo looked decent. Players looked, there was a togetherness in the team, which I think has been lacking from Celtic. So I won't read too much into it, and we'll just kind of see how the next game goes against Bristol City on Saturday. But yeah, I thought it was a decent first outing for him, and obviously they've been pleased at 3 goals and winning the game.
Yeah, loads of comments coming through, understandably, due to the nature of one of the main headlines. But what I would like to say is that no, I wouldn't back any footballer who is engaged in such behaviour. However, we need to know evidentially what has been done before we comment on the specific player in question. We're talking about an allegation that is breaking news. It's currently being discussed on major broadcasters' channels as we speak, and he is a Celtic player, and that is why he's been discussed here. Let's have a wee chat then about the rebuild, JP, because again, you know, we know how big it is. I think Ange Postecoglou will have known that before he's come back to the club. He's looking at the squad as much as he possibly can during these games. But we have been linked with loads of players, and I think it was his comments around him having no real control over that got some people concerned. But again, we're maybe just looking too much into his words. We've been linked with Mario Vuskovic, Karl Starfelt, George Baldock, Aaron Hickey, Kyle Edwards. I'm pretty sure there is loads of work happening behind the scenes. But as I said yesterday, in the first friendly match played by Martin O'Neill, we had not brought in any new players. And in the first friendly match played under Brendan Rodgers, we had only brought in one, and that was Moussa Dembele, who didn't play in the first game. But we're in kind of different territory now, aren't we, JP? We need to get bodies in, and we need to get them in quickly. Do you share some of the concerns that I was looking at on social media?
A little bit. I mean, I like I said last week, I just think that the transfer market climate is massively different to what it would have been in Martin O'Neill's time, when it would have been, you know, signings and transfers every single day, you know, in that window. And then if it was a window, even at that point, I don't know if it was just... Was there a window at that point?
No, because remember, Lenny came in quite a bit later in the season, didn't he?
Oh, of course, yeah, he did that. He came in the December, because his debut was Dens Park. Diddy Agat last minute off the knee. What a night that was.
What a finish.
Oh, it was brilliant. I remember my mate Michael saying you could just imagine loads of TVs and radios getting flung out of windows, not by Celtic supporters, but by supporters of the other team who'd be tuning in, you know, expecting us to drop points. And then that went in. That was good. But I know, I think I'm quite calm about it, in that we can only do what we can do in the current environment. You can't make a transfer market happen as one club. You know, it's either a bustling transfer market or it's not. And right now, I don't really think it is. the signings that we've been linked with, I'd never heard of Carl Starfelt, but I mean, it's a great name. I'm glad he's international. And the video that Colin shared of him singing Modern Talking's "You're My Heart, You're My Soul" won me over straight away. So I mean, before he's even kicked the ball, he's a good guy in my book, because that was a pretty good part. And I think it was for Russian TV or something like that.
Brilliant. Just also to pick up on a point coming in on the comment section, what I've noticed, and it seems to be even more prevalent now than ever, JP, is that people are picking things up that you say online and twisting them deliberately or otherwise and creating some different narrative as if it was you that said it. Now, Roddy, no, this pod isn't actually saying that everybody does it. That's an absolute nonsense to suggest that. We're not saying that at all. What we're trying to say is that there is a toxic culture at this moment in time, and I found this out from speaking to a number of females over the last few weeks, that footballers are constantly bombarding females, young or otherwise, with requests for images. And that is something that's happening, and we were talking about it in the wider respect of how Celtic are treating the situation, how they're going to deal with the situation. And so, no, that's not what the podcast was trying to say in any way, shape or form, JP. But it is quite frustrating at times, JP, where you read things that you have allegedly said or done or been criticised for online, when you think to yourself, I don't even want to engage with that online, because then I'm getting pulled into an argument, even though I'm just trying to clarify what's happened.
Yeah, that I've learned the hard way to stay away from the YouTube comments on this video, because people pick up on stuff you say, and it's completely, I ended up having a back and forward last week with a guy, and we were both basically saying the same thing, but he'd taken what I'd said out of context on here about Celtic fans wanting or expecting the club to spend money, and I think that's what most people do think right now, that we should be going out and spending £4 or £5 million on key positions in the team, and I just don't think that that's going to happen. And that's what I was saying. How it ended up getting mixed up last week, I have no idea, but that's what I was saying. But yeah, it can get completely misconstrued, especially on Twitter, where it's just like a sentence, and then I mean, that part of it, Mark Hughes, you're getting hung out to dry for that. It's so stupid that all you did was at that point.
I'm happy to talk about it. No one's actually asked me about it, interestingly enough. But the accusations around that I was somehow trying to work as some kind of recruitment liaison between a manager and the club, that I had taken time out of my day to phone him and ask a question. The scenario was completely different.
I know.
And in actual fact, anyone, let's take it right back to the basics. Anybody who was speaking to a potential manager or footballer who said during that conversation, I want to go to that club, right? Anybody who's been involved in this scenario where they're talking to someone, and then the first question you would say is, and do you mind if that quote's used? And if they say no, actually, I would love you to put that out there. I would love you to use that quote. And then you put it out. I see it all the time. But I think what happened, JP, is, who do you think you are? You're not a journalist. You're not a voice of the fans. Therefore, you're not allowed to have the freedom of that speech. As it happens, Mark Hughes wasn't my first choice for the Celtic manager. Near was Ange Postecoglou. So the way that it's construed and misconstrued, that tweet, right, resulted in 750 notifications over that weekend, right? The vast majority of which were abusive, right? It got over 500,000 impressions. I couldn't believe, and I didn't do it to get clicks, because I don't have a clickbait site. I wouldn't dream of doing that. But if I'm speaking, let's say, to a footballer who says, I'd love to sign for Celtic, and he's out of contract and he's 28 years of age, I'm going to tweet that. Why wouldn't I? But people, instantly think you're fame hungry, you're attention seeking. And if anybody is actually taking the time to speak to me, they know that that's quite far removed from the type of person I am. However, I've never really used this platform to defend myself, JP, so cheers for bringing it up.
It just bugs me every time I see people like putting the boot in about that, because it's like, well, And if you'd actually step back and analyse what you said, it wasn't at the point where we'd appointed Ange Postecoglou. It was the day after or the day of the Eddie Howe thing breaking down. So it wasn't like you jumping in and saying, oh, well, now you've got Ange Postecoglou, but I've got Mark Hughes here. It was like you were pointing out the fact that there was a guy with Premiership experience who was available and wanted the job. That is the end of the story as far as I'm concerned. That's exactly what happened. Anything else is just somebody being mischievous as far as I'm concerned.
But again, there's the nature of social media. JP,
well,
you put out a good news story, it's not going to get the same traction. But hey ho, that's the world in which we live. Declan, we are talking about the rebuild. We're talking about concerns around some of the signings. We've been linked to numerous players. Now, JP talks about bringing in someone of a certain quality or of a certain standard, and a figure that he used around the ballpark, a £4 or £5 million player. I found it interesting yesterday that both Barkas and Ayeti started. He was asked about it. He says, listen, these guys have got a clean slate. What's your thoughts on that? Because I'm still of the view that one of the main areas we need to strengthen in is still the goalkeeper's position. I still don't think we've got a goalkeeper that fills me with any kind of confidence.
You know, I'm still very much so divided on it because of the whole situation that happened last year by Barkey, as he's now referred to. Due to the fact that we brought him in for a decent fee, he started, got injured in the game against AC Milan, disappeared out the team. Scott Bain came back in. Scott Bain then, went a run in the team. Then Hazard ended up coming in. But then, while that was going on, and we changed goalkeepers, the back four or three or whatever formation we decided to play that week was constantly changing. So for a goalkeeper, in terms of their confidence, it does not help them and it doesn't bring any stability to your backline when that's changing so much. But then after that, the manager came out and said, he's my number one.
Yeah.
That's fine. Okay, cool. So then he plays the game at just before the Dubai debacle. Come back, he plays at Livingston, and he's dropped. Don't see him again. Neil Lennon then departs the club. John Kennedy comes in. He doesn't play him, so he just completely disappears. So I think in terms of his own confidence, coming to Glasgow in the middle of a pandemic probably not helped, coming from Greece, and I think he was staying in a hotel and all these different factors to kind of put into it. Now he said that time, it's a clean slate for everyone. As society starts to open back up, hopefully he can do a bit of mixing with his teammates and kind of get to know them a bit better and become a bit more comfortable in his surroundings. So I still think Vasilis Barkas can be a decent keeper for him, so I'm not going to write him off yet, but maybe in terms of the other, Hazard signed in a long-term deal, probably the guy that out of the three I'd probably be trying to ditch would be Scott Bain, because last season I don't get why he was first choice pick for Celtic. I don't think he's Celtic quality at all. So on him, I think Barkas has a chance. On Albi Ayeti, interesting to see him get the captain's armband yesterday. I thought he looked a bit leaner, looked a wee bit more interested. So again, we paid big money for him. Got his goal yesterday. I just hope we can make a player out of him. But again, he's probably our only option up front. Obviously, Edwards scored yesterday, but there's still that big question mark over his future. And what we've just, we've got another issue on the horizon here as well. So yeah, I think Albion Ayeti and Vasilis Barkas could be big players for this season, so I won't write them off yet. But in terms of the striking position and probably goalkeeper, could probably do with a couple of signings in both positions, yeah.
We've been speaking quite a bit, JP, about these players who, under a new manager, find a second wind. Their Celtic careers are rejuvenated, and we've gone through some examples of the past. Do you think that perhaps one of the big money buys from last season is that player?
I'd like to think so. I'd like to think it. Well, I mean, as I said, the transfer market is in a weird state, so we're not maybe able to go out and get people from other countries as readily as we might like to. I saw, it's not football related, but I saw quite a horrendous stat this morning that Stuart Braithwaite shared it, saying that the application to Scottish universities from EU countries is dropped by 50%, which is absolutely terrifying when you think about it, because and then apparently there was some comments from people saying, oh well, there's more places for folk from Scotland, and it's like, well, that's not really how universities work. Like they rely on foreign foreign students coming over to study here, and it's quite nice the fact that happens. So who knows what's going on in terms of the transfer market, in terms of like signing players. So you want the guys that we've already got in the door to start doing a job for us, and if Barkas and Ayeti or both are two of those, then it'd be a bit of a bonus, especially when we shelled out big money for them and they've been getting big wages for an entire, more than a year now, for doing very little. Let's face facts. I mean, a lot of money. I mean, if you sign for $5 million, your salary is going to be pretty insane. It's not going to be 2 or 3 grand a week. It's going to be, I don't know, 15, 20 grand a week, somewhere in that ballpark. So, I think if they're going to be, if they're sticking about, then it's time for them to step up and earn it.
I found it interesting when details of Laxalt's deal when he left AC Milan came out, and I think the transfer fee was something like 3.1 million quid, because obviously AC Milan were wanting him off the wage bill, and the deal that he has just signed is worth 41 grand a week. Now, even if that was the exact wages he was on last season, Celtic would have been paying roughly half of that, So you're talking about, value for money, JP, and you would hope that almost retrospectively you can start clawing back some of the value for Barkas and for Ayeti. I know football doesn't work like that, but it would be nice. And at the moment, Declan, I'm not completely writing any of them off, but I'm more hopeful for Ayeti. I had a really good chat with Alan Morrison a few weeks back, and he was talking all around the strikers that Ange likes to utilise. And I think we've seen this yesterday. They've got to not only work back and be defensive, but they've got to win the ball back. And the interesting stat, talking about Lee Griffiths, is that last season he didn't do that a single time. And throughout the entire season, he didn't win a ball back once. Whereas Ayeti, his stats were pretty good, and also he gave away more fouls than any other player, I think, because he was trying to win the ball back. I mean, you'll remember some of the ridiculous attempts that were in the ball back where he was ending up on the red ashes, I would call it, the tracks on the side of the park. But at least he was fitting the mould of Ange Postecoglou. And I think yesterday, looking at it, there was the fresh slate, and I'm all for that. Yesterday, we put out a tweet on the ACSOM page looking at the man of the match, and I think it was interesting that there's some time to go on it, but at the moment Owen Moffat is winning the vote at 43%, followed by Liam Shaw 37%, then Sorrow 12%, Held at 8%. So let's have a look at some of the performers yesterday. Declan, we've already spoken a bit about Owen Moffat, and I hope we see a lot more of that guy. I mean, I wouldn't like for him to go to the Colts now. I just think that, in order to develop him, and a decision will be made between quite a few heads of departments, I'm sure, I would like to see him in and around the first team squad. I know I'm talking here about an hour of football, but surely if you want him to develop, you don't then put him back to the 5th tier of Scottish football.
It depends. I mean, we've had this conversation, a couple of weeks ago in terms of it's a kind of catch-22 situation with the Colts, because obviously players will want game time. At times, around the first team squad, they won't be able to get that opportunity. So it depends. Again, we'd spoken earlier a couple of weeks back on whether, guys like Ewan Henderson who went out to the Pars and McEnroy who impressed yesterday, there's a level there that they can go to that is a bit higher than, the Lowland League, and they can really, pursue their career a wee bit more. Look at Connell too at Queen's Park. So there's a catch-22, I think, for Celtic's perspective. Obviously, you want to keep players internally in the club to then move them up to the first team and try and develop them and have a clear pathway. But there's also the point that, players probably above that level, some of them. And, it'd be great to get, constant football, but be getting constant football at a much higher level. So we'll just wait and see what happens. Again, it could be, a loan out to a championship club. So we'll just see what happens. Again, the lineup on Saturday will be interesting. Apologies, I said Bristol City earlier. That's next week. It's Charlton at the weekend. So, the Scotland boys will probably return, and you might get some of the big hitters back, like Chris Ayer and whatnot, back into the team. So just wait and see what happens. But it'll be interesting to see how we do our transfer business. As I say, there'll be a pathway there for the Colts, but, in terms of some guys, it might be better to send them to a, Scottish Championship team to let them, try and develop that wee bit further at a higher level, and that's no disrespect to any of the Lowland League clubs.
And by the way, don't beat yourself up about that wee error there, Declan, because yesterday, I don't know if you noticed, the commentator called Ross County Ross City, which was interesting. And when he called them Ross City, he was talking about Leo Held. Now, you'll remember his dad, John Olaf Held, who played for Nottingham Forest, JP, back in the 90s. That's his father, no?
No, I don't actually. That's beyond me. I mustn't have got the sticker album that season. I would remember him if there was a sticker of him. I don't know. What's are you talking about? 93,
97.
94?
I think he went there about. Yeah.
Sticker albums were done for me at that point. I was spending all my money on
records and gig tickets.
On Celtic, actually. I mean, that's proper when I started, going to as many games as I could. When I met Mr. Michael Taggart of the Ardross and Garryowen Celtic Supporters Club, and he showed me the way, and I've never changed that since. So
never changed. Now you've given a CSC a shout out, as have I. Declan, just while we're here, you want to give your CSC a wee shout out? I know that you're deeply involved.
Many will bet the old CSC and Strathclyde Uni CSC, which we'll hope to kind of get up and running, because we've not been able to do anything. We've got Mr. John Clark as our patron, so hopefully we'll be able to do something with John in the next coming months. Fingers crossed.
He's juggling, isn't he, JP? Yeah, running supporters clubs, meeting famous Hollywood actors by day, coming on to ACSOM by afternoon. Oh, brilliant! So Chris Dolmith comes in to say Held is better than Welsh. I'm a big fan of Welsh, I've got to say, so I would rather talk about both players being very good prospects. I think, JP, I'm a big fan of Welsh. I think that he conducted himself really well under difficult circumstances last season. When he came into the team, I had been chatting to a youth coach who had seen him at youth level, and he just said, you look out for his distribution, his passing ability is varied and it's excellent. And I don't think we saw that in the early days. But Alan Morrison was telling us, having looked at the numbers, and he obviously runs the Celtic by Numbers blog, that he is up there as one of the best passers of the ball at Celtic Park, Stephen Welsh. So I'm hoping to see more from him. I'm hoping to see him establish himself, even further as part of the first team squad and as a first pick, JP. But that was, I've got to admit, that was the first time I'd seen Leo Held. I didn't see any of his performances for Ross County. I can't remember if he played against Celtic. If he did, I certainly didn't see him playing against Celtic. But obviously John Hughes was giving him lots of praise last season. I thought he was solid yesterday. He looked really, really confident yesterday.
He came on the third, didn't he? He was as part of that team. I've still got 10 minutes of that to watch, so that's quite a lot of that game, really, of that part of the game.
A good bit of the end, JP.
Is that right? Okay. So I've not actually, I was working yesterday, so I didn't manage to watch it live, and then was watching that nonsense last night with England. So I haven't caught up fully on it. So the last 10 minutes evade me at the moment, so I can't comment fully on Held. I thought O'Connor looked all right, going forward, but particularly impressed by Shaw, and not by. It's so hard to judge on a game like this. You can't. It's not as if they played, intense 90 minutes. But I saw bits from Shaw that I was like, right, he's. I think he's first team ready. He's got a good touch. He controls it well in tight spaces. He's got a good pass on him as well. He's strong. He's tall. And they made reference to that in the commentary, that for a big guy he's got really good close control and good feet. So I did like to look at him and think we may have won a watch getting him for a development fee or whatever it is we're going to have to pay for him. So
It was good to see the new signing, Declan. What was your thoughts? I think Joe Ledley was waxing lyrical about him, like JP says. Very, very solid. I think when he came in, because of his age and some of the transfers we had done in the past, bringing players in of that ilk, maybe not seeing them for a while, and I know that we're playing opposition who aren't top calibre, but in terms of what we've seen of him in a Celtic jersey, I was really impressed yesterday. Yeah,
I thought he was very comfortable, for his debut for Celtic. I thought he moved the ball about well. He was always an option in midfield, and he was going, was described as box to box, and he was running the channels from box to box, and that can be quite a lazy description to use. But I thought he got himself about well, and it'll be interesting again to see how he develops into a player. I mean, the two boys we've seen from Sheffield Wednesday, if you read or anything or listen to any Sheffield Wednesday fans, they say they were probably the best two prospects. So hopefully again we can develop those two boys into players. But I think the worry still is that we're not wanting to develop players too much, especially this season. What's at stake? We want first team ready guys, and like Starfelt and other guys that we were talking about, Vuskovic. We want guys to come in and really shake things up. But again, it's probably anybody's time to play for in this rebuild, and they might get their opportunity and just impress us, and can only wait and see.
One thing that I think might still be a concern, having seen the game yesterday, JP, is the right back position. And again, I'm always at pains to not just go in with studs up on Anthony Ralston. And maybe we shouldn't expect any more from him because he's been so kind of out the picture for so long, JP. It must be hard to get thrown in. He doesn't play a game. I think it was for 18 months, then he got a game in January. Remember, and it was that period of time. Back in from the colds, he's featured in Postecoglou's first game. He featured in Brendan Rodgers' first game 5 years ago as a 17-year-old. But I do have concerns about the right back position. I mean, Declan's already mentioned the two signings we've made. Do you think that Uragiri could maybe be deployed at right back, because we're quite short in that area of the park?
Yeah, I mean that's definitely one of the positions that you want us to go out and spend well, and and put out a significant layout on a player that has been scouted properly, and it isn't going to come in, be a flop and take a season to settle in or anything like that. I mean, it's such a, you see it, I'm no football expert by any means, but you see it now. The fullbacks in any side are so important in a game, and we were so weakened last season in our fullback areas that it really showed in a lot of the games. And I just think, we have to, there's no question we have to go out and spend. If we have a budget of 15 million to spend on players, I would really want 3 or 4 of that spent on a right back, like I say, who's been scouted properly and will adapt to the environment, the situation in Glasgow, lockdown, all of that. Not somebody that's basically been plucked from the other side of the world, who's never lived in a culture similar or anything like that, because it just has to be, every box needs to be ticked on that one, because what we've got really at the moment, imagine if we did actually qualify for the Champions League, and I know that's a huge if, but imagine if we did get in and the right backs that we have at our disposal right now was all we had to go to. It would be behind the couch stuff, I think.
It would be deeply concerning. I mean, the other night there, I was chatting to Russell Boyce, another ACSOM contributor, part of the team. We were doing the Scream of Celica show, JP, which is about your two loves of Celtic and music. And we were looking back at a game that Celtic played against Dundee United. You'll remember it, 1996, March, where we scored 2 goals in the space of about 90 seconds at the end of the game. Van Hooijdonk and Tom. Yeah, both goals set up by Jackie McNamara. And when you watch the highlights of that game, what stands out is that traditional fullback, and you would expect nothing less from a Tommy Burns team, the traditional fullback overlapping up the right and up the left. You had Tosh McKinlay and Jackie Mack. And I know the game's changing, it's always evolving, I completely get that. But I just look at that Celtic side and I don't see enough. I really don't see enough in terms of imposing fullbacks. And we're talking about Sheffield Wednesday, Uragiri potentially having an opportunity to play right back. And it takes me back actually to players who have played for both clubs. For example, the first one I'm going to mention, I'm going to throw it at Declan because it's his big pal, Kearney, Jim Craig. So, he had a spell at Sheffield Wednesday. I think when he came back from South Africa, Declan, I think that's right.
Yeah, it was. I think it was very little appearances he made down there, and then that was it over. But South Africa, I think he only actually did to get a holiday out of it, he told me. So
it's not bad when you've got a profession in the background, working away on the dentistry. We're talking about Jim Craig's dentistry last week, actually, and I failed to mention that he was the guy that did George Conley's teeth So George, his teammate, went into Jim's practice and got his teeth all done, because some of the early photos of George, he's got no front teeth. When he scores that goal in the cup final against Rangers and he runs away, arms aloft, big grin with no front teeth. Well, Jim Craig sorted that out for him. Another right back was, of course, Chris Morris, who Celtic signed from Sheffield Wednesday as well, JP. I thought he turned into a tremendous player for Celtic, and I thought we probably sold him prematurely. And now we're looking at the jersey over your right-hand side and other players that have played for Celtic and Sheffield Wednesday, and you may or may not wish to name this individual, but who do you think's the best Italian that's played for Celtic?
I mean, push everyone to one side. Anoni was a great laugh and everything else, a bit of a madcap, but when I was a wee guy, 14, 15 years old, Paolo Di Canio was just absolutely sensational for Celtic. And yes, I certainly don't agree with his politics or many other things that he's been associated with. But as a football player, strictly when he goes over that white line for Celtic, seeing that time, he was just an amazing person to have, an amazing player to be able to go and watch. I remember one day I was at school and I said to my mate Joe, I was like, "Do you want to go to the game tonight? Oh, let's just go through. Let's just get tickets and go through," because you could. It wasn't the sort of. It would have been '96, I think, and it was a Tuesday or Wednesday night against Kilmarnock, and we just went through after school. I think he'd just passed his test, and we drove through, parked up, got tickets, and Celtic battered Kilmarnock 6-0 that night, and Di Canio was absolutely unplayable. Like, he was doing keepy uppies at the corner flag and stuff like that. It was an absolute masterclass. And to pay what, 15 quid or whatever to watch that at a game was just amazing. So I love the fact that he, despite what folks say about me, he loved Tommy Burns, and Tommy Burns loved him, like put an arm around him, and arguably kept him at Celtic when he may have left after only a couple of weeks. When he saw the standard in training, he was just like, "What have I come to here? I'm getting hospital bills and training from Peter Grant and stuff like that." And thankfully he stayed for a bit. Well,
the reason I asked that question, actually, JP, is that I do recall, I love interviewing people, footballers in particular, and I was meant to be interviewing Paolo Di Canio, and when that was announced, and by the way, it was to benefit the Tommy Burns Skin Cancer Charity, because obviously that's run by Tommy's daughters, and so there was obviously a charitable element to it, but the very fact that I had the audacity to agree to share a stage with Di Canio had caused a bit of an issue among certain people within the Celtic support. Yes. And what my kind of defence was in that is that I don't agree with his politics. I completely oppose his politics. Without a shadow of a doubt, I oppose that. And in actual fact, I interviewed Professor Willie Maley, and the interview's on YouTube. It's a video interview, and I would check it out. It's a fantastic, because of him, not because it's a fantastic interview, because he's such a character. And
especially his father as well, who
precisely.
is a total legend and hero.
Exactly. And I asked the question, Declan, about that, this strange dichotomy between looking for a view on a player who you can't airbrush out of the history books, but a player whose fast, attractive football is everything that Celtic represents, yet his politics is everything that Celtic is against. And, watch the interview, because Willie Maley gives an interesting insight into his dad. And as Declan quite rightly said, he fought Franco, he fought fascism at a time where it was going to be, it wasn't a decision taken out of his hands. He actively sought to do so. He was a revolutionary, and he said, he loved watching Paolo Di Canio. That I'm talking about his dad. When he was alive, he loved watching Paolo Di Canio playing for Celtic, even with the backdrop of his political leanings. So it is difficult because we're passionate Celtic fans, and there's a political edge to that, Declan. But if you ask a Celtic fan who's the best Italian that's ever played for Celtic, There is only one answer if you're just looking at ability. Unless you want to tell me otherwise. I know I was a big fan of Donati, but I didn't think he played that many outstanding games.
Well, it's before my time, but that interview I thought was very interesting. James Maley's one of my all-time heroes. And again, the social history background to it, Scotland in the 1930s, and especially the Catholic community in Scotland, would have been actually quite pro-fascist with the Italians and the Spanish countries. So, the whole social history aspect of it's very interesting. And again, it's very interesting to hear, one of Scotland's top professors talk about it and talk about his father and his love for Paolo Di Canio, which I thought was incredible, a man who fought against fascism in the 1930s. So, again, it's a great interview. It's a great learning curve, I think, for anybody to learn about not just that, but just the whole situation there with somebody who actively went to fight against Franco in the 1930s. But I was a big fan of Massimo Donati. It's kind of my time. And I remember having the dark green 0708. Would that be 0708? Green away top with Donati 18 in the back. So yeah, big fan of Massimo Donati. And I know I think he's got a Celtic tattoo as well. So he obviously took the club to his heart. So I'm going to be diplomatic and say Massimo Donati for me.
The thing is, Di Canio would have held those beliefs while he played at Celtic. It's just they weren't widely known. You know what I mean? I mean, there's no way he just changed in the years after Celtic. I mean, he's been that way inclined, probably since he was a kid. So it just came to the fore after his time at Celtic. But yeah, it's always quite hard and sad a bit when things like that happen to tarnish a player's legacy, especially when he's been a hero to a lot of young Celtic supporters at that time who had only really experienced absolutely horrendous times. Let's face it, 5-6 seasons of no winning anything at all, and just watching Rangers steam away into the distance. So.
Well, see the thing with that, JP, and a lot of people are coming up with the golden boots, memories of the golden boots, and how could you forget? And I'm going to bring this up so I don't forget about Ononi as well. But Russell was asking, because that was when you're so immersed in going to the games, JP, and you remember every nuance of every game. Unless it's an away day and Declan's out with his mates, you might not remember much about that day. But you remember everything, don't you? And I think that what Russell was trying to establish was around about that time the real change in direction that Celtic were taking, because up until then we had signed very, very few. Up until Van Hooijdonk was where we started the conversation. Yeah. We had signed very few overseas players, and we went back to Johannes Edvaldsen and Bent Martin in the 60s and 70s, and of course there was a few in the 80s with Jakanowski and Dovcek, for example. But the only player when Van Hooijdonk came to Celtic from overseas, the only player that we had was Rudi Vata at that point. But the kind of signing policy and the scouting network that Tommy Burns had created meant that we very quickly brought in players like Andreas Thom, and then George Cadet, and then Paolo Di Canio, of course, and also Morten Vikors. But again, Vikors was playing in Scottish football at the time. But that whole scouting network of bringing these players in, we signed Di Canio from AC Milan. We signed him from AC Milan. It was incredible, and he was a very entertaining player, as you know, because you've seen him. But just a very quick one on Ononi. As you say, he's a character. Is he a cult icon? Perhaps?
Definitely. Yeah.
A cult icon.
For the multicoloured wig in the Coca-Cola Cup final alone, that image of him wearing that, cutting about, I think it was Ibrox, wasn't it, when we won that?
It was, yeah. And I could tell you who's got the ball from that game as well, just for the old anorak in you.
Must be Simon Donnelly, no?
You know who it is? It is Kevin Miles, who wrote the song Celtic, My Heart, My Soul. The ball was lofted into the stand, and I think his dad caught it, so he's got the ball. There you go, the things you learn. Talking about interviews, I had the opportunity to talk to Enrico Ononi when he was up, as if he just travelled up, when he was over a couple of years ago, and I was interviewing him about the fact that he was able to, nullify the threat of Brian Laudrup when we played Rangers, famously. He had Laudrup in his back pocket. Now, and I didn't realise this, but Enrico Noni doesn't speak much English, so he had his interpreter, who was his daughter, along with him. And Declan, did you get a chance to see him when he was over? Did you go to the Admiral and see him?
I met him, in David Ross's pub. Yeah, I met him that night.
And we were talking about the Loudrop thing, the back pocket. And he says, well, I had played against his big brother Michael, who was a far better player. He said, I'd played against Maradona. I'd played against Hullet. So you're thinking about his Roma career in Italy. He says, so by the time I come over here and I'm playing against Loudrop, no problem. So he found him no problem because he had played against top class opposition. But that's what he's famous for, nullifying Loudrop, back pocket of Loudrop. Oh no, I know. Is that right? Not the view. So there we go.
Pantofolo boots as well. They were the boots that him and Di Canio were Pantofolo.
The golden ones. The golden ones were that.
Well, you can get golden
brand,
ones, you can get white ones. They actually sell them in Grieve Sport. Other sports stores are available, but I was in Grieve Sport recently, getting a thing printed for my pal's birthday. I bought my vintage Real Madrid strip and got Loudrop 10 on the back. Like I found the lettering on eBay and got Loudrop 10 on the back. It's the Kelme strip, the one with the paws.
The paw, yeah.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of Real Madrid, as you probably know, but he loved that strip when he was younger. But they sell Pantofolo boots. And I was so tempted to get a pair. I mean, it's ridiculous. I mean, I don't play football at any level other than 7-a-sides or 5-a-sides, but I wanted to get a pair of Pantofolo just because of that. They've got the gold stars on them. They look amazing. Like they're
tremendous.
Black and gold Pantofolo.
Nice wee plug for Grieve Sport. If you want to sponsor us, get in touch. Thanks everybody for getting involved in the comment section. We realise that there are some topics on today's podcast that we would rather be talking about the football, but we will also react to what is happening in the world of Celtic, no matter what that story is. So thanks all for getting involved. Thank you for watching us on Twitter and on Facebook, but also on YouTube. And if you're watching on YouTube, get subscribing. Click the subscribe button. It's free. You get daily content free of charge, and you'll also be put into a prize draw to win a multi-platinum disc as presented to the world. Do you want it, mate?
I love it, yeah.
Wait till you see some of the other prizes. We've got prizes that will keep us going for a year, and we'll have at least a monthly prize draw. Sometimes it will be fortnightly, and we'll be giving away loads of incredible prizes. Just subscribe to us on YouTube. That's all you need to do. All that's left for me to say is thank you to JP Mason and Declan McConville once again. It's been an absolute pleasure, gentlemen. Thank you for joining me on A Celtic State of Mind.